Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. Thank you so very much. I've been traveling the last 24 hours, which is one of the reasons why I was not on the air yesterday, because I was in the air, and I am actually 2 time zones removed from very, very damp South Central Texas, and I'm in the more sunny and much, much drier climes of the West Coast, California. And it has nothing to do with the fact that I was experiencing any kind of great damage due to the effect of Harvey. I just had to take care of some business here on the West Coast, and so I'll be doing the show here in California over the next couple of days, and of course we'll be returning to the South Central location where I'll be broadcasting to you again live later in the week. So what's going on out there? First of all, an extremely wow. You know, when we try to wrap our heads around an event like Harvey, it's almost impossible in some ways to really kind of get into the nature and the scope and the breadth and here's where we kind of invocate, the nature of God, the true nature of God, and the spirit of some other divine, heavenly, powerful, quantum, supernatural, holy force to begin to engage in the affairs of men and women. Because it's almost beyond description what's going on down there. And I'll be on today for the next 40 minutes, and I'm going to try to break down some of what's happened, what's happening, what I know from people that are living there in Houston, what they're telling me, and basically what I can sort of piece together from other sources. Now, Harvey, just to give you an update, has stalled and has gone back out over the Gulf of Mexico. And this is probably one of the worst case scenarios that could occur, because when it goes over the Gulf of Mexico, what does it do? It is soaking up water. It is collecting water in the Gulf. So at some point it will lurch, one might think, or this is the sort of the projected path, it will lurch back towards landfall, and at this point it appears to be headed east. It appears to be headed east, and that is a pretty significant development, because what do we have that's east of Houston? We've got Beaumont, Texas, which is another really powerful, large oil-producing, gas refining area. That's pretty significant. And then we also have Lake Charles, and then we also have, of course, New Orleans. And guess what? We're coming up on the anniversary of Katrina. That's right. So here we go. Harvey is slamming into history. That's what's taking place. So this is a profound, absolutely profound, and quite possibly American-changing event. Now, notice I did not say world, because it may have some implications or ramifications with the world itself, but it is really going to, we can't even begin to calculate the impact of this. Let me give you an idea of the scope of this event. I'm calling it an event, and I'll show you why I'm calling it an event. It's not. It's more than a storm. It has dumped more, like 5 times more water on Houston than Katrina did in New Orleans. And Katrina was a pretty heavy event, although anybody who has any nose for what went on at Katrina knows that those levees were blown, and they released the water, and it was all a big scam to move generational landowners out of New Orleans, and it was also a very interesting human experiment as to what would take place in a time of crisis when they got a bunch of people together under one roof, i.e., the New Orleans Superdome, and gave them food and alcohol and water, and then walked away and left them to their own devices. And the Superdome became a horror dome. So Katrina is one of the worst black eyes in American history, as far as I'm concerned. It was yet another moment in the George Bush administration that made me want to absolutely puke. And who can forget Kanye West's famous appearance on the Katrina telethon, where he looks into the camera standing next to Mike Myers and says, George Bush doesn't care about black people. Where is Kanye West today, by the way? I'll tell you where he is. He's sitting somewhere at a kitchen table, probably in California, and somebody's wiping drool off of his mouth. Yeah, that's right. Kanye West has been functionally destabilized, taken out. But that's another story. So here we go. Let's get into some of the main pieces around Harvey. The mayor of Houston, this guy Turner, he's under fire. And he should be, because he refused to give people the evacuation sign. Now, one could make an argument that if indeed there was the call to evacuate, that there could be more deaths, there could be more violence, or there could have been more deaths, more chaos, more confusion when people are trying to get out of Houston on the roads. It could have been horrible. Houston's, if I'm not mistaken, the fourth largest city in the country, behind New York, Chicago, and LA. After that, it's Houston. So we're talking massive amounts of people. All right. So one could make a case that it was perhaps, and these are in quotes, perhaps the right thing to do to not order an evacuation. However, that said, we knew well enough in advance that Harvey was coming. I mean, this was, we were talking, 5 days before it actually hit landfall. They actually saw this storm beginning to form and become this, this supercell. 5 days is enough to, even if we account for the fact that Harvey really began to hit about a day and a half to 2 days out before the real massive action going on, or the real meat of that dump, that they could have, within a 3-day period, and this is where I believe that the mayor of Houston really screwed up, managed this thing and made sure that if people needed to leave the city, they could have and should have been encouraged to leave the city, especially the areas that are near levees, near dams. It could have been done extremely efficiently. These neighborhoods could have been targeted. They could have had people going door to door through those neighborhoods. They could have deployed the Houston police, Houston emergency services. They could have deployed FEMA at that point in time. FEMA's there. FEMA's going to be in Houston for a very long time now. A very long time. That's another part of this story, is all of a sudden we're going to see the FEMAization, not the feminization, the FEMAization of Houston take place. And that has wide-ranging consequences. Now, one of the things that I don't want to do is I don't want to summarily bash FEMA, but over the course of the last 15 to 20 years, about 20 years, because FEMA's been around for a while, FEMA has metastasized and has become kind of joined at the hip with DHS, the Department of Homeland Security. Between the two of them, they form the two largest divisions and bureaus of the federal government. DHS just swallowed everybody up when it came online post 9/11. FEMA was around before DHS, but it obviously became much bigger as well. So there are people I know that have suffered. This was prior to 9/11. I knew people in Hawaii who had suffered damage due to hurricanes hitting Hawaii, and FEMA was there, and FEMA took care of them, and they got money from FEMA. I mean, it actually was very helpful and saved them. So I'm not going to summarily bash that version of FEMA, but just like everything else in the United States and our government, it's all metastasized. So it really has become something that still retains a portion of that service that can actually help people in an emergency situation. But there's another part of FEMA that we all know about, we've read about for many years, the FEMA relocation camps, and all of the sort of more tentacled version of FEMA. So FEMA, we're going to see this version of FEMA in Houston for a while. And let me just see here. Let me get into a headline here so I can read this to you. So let me just go see if I can find this. Let me go here. I swear to God, these people listen to my radio show sometimes because I see my stuff come up in other people's feeds. And here we go. Let me just go here. All right, so let's get into this. This is from the blog Economic Collapse. It says Hurricane Harvey will render some parts of Texas uninhabitable for an extended period of time. I'm going to read this. I'll probably read the first 4 or 5 paragraphs here, maybe get into some of the highlighted paragraphs. So this is from today. Let's see, the 27th is from yesterday. Michael Snyder. Do you remember what Hurricane Katrina did to New Orleans? Well, now we are watching the same thing happen in southeast Texas. On Friday, Hurricane Harvey made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane. It is the first hurricane to make landfall in the United States in 12 years. Remember, I talked about that. I talked about how the Gulf Stream had been basically corrupted and is non-existent for the most part. And that's due to the fact that we've been manipulating the weather on the planet for roughly the last 30 years, and the planet does not have the ability to manage its own weather systems, which has done quite nicely for thousands and thousands of years. But because they've deployed Atlantean technology and believe that they're the masters of climate and masters of the world, and can use weather as a weapon, which they've been doing, by the way, in North Korea. And I talked about this over on Facebook and here on the show, that North Korea is suffering an extreme drought, which means South Korea is also experiencing extreme drought as well. But South Korea doesn't have sanctions. North Korea does, and severe sanctions. So essentially what has been happening is that the people in North Korea are starving. The longer that the drought lasts in North Korea, the longer that the sanctions will pound them like invisible mortar shells. And what we'll see a depleted North Korean population and army, and they're basically one and the same. If you are a citizen of North Korea, you're in the army. You are weaponized and ready to go. Now, we don't know what's happening with backdoor channels. We don't know if China is secretly slipping supplies or foodstuffs, or Russia or whomever into North Korea to sustain them, because we're just not privy to those things, unless of course the mainstream media wants to make up lies and try to move the needle on us and get us all riled up. But that's not really, we're not privy to that. But we're seeing a weather war take place in North Korea. And we've seen this happen again and again and again. I mean, here in Texas, well, back in Texas, 3 years ago, not this year, not last year, but the year before that, we had record precipitation. And I mean, if you stretched out Harvey, we would have had Harvey over the course of a whole summer. But we did have some time, spring, summer, some time to, kind of absorb all the moisture and all the rain and kind of get it back together again. And then we were hit again and again and again. And this gets back into the tragedies that happened in Wimberley, which is not very far from where I live in Texas, where people lost lives and the devastation. I mean, I drove through Wimberley after the massive floods there. And it was like you were just driving through a war zone. I mean, not necessarily in the city, but down by the river. Trees were upturned and there was debris from the river washed, 30, 40 feet onto the shoreline, that far away from the river, which had receded. It was just mind-blowing. So we've been through this in Texas for a while now, and I've been talking about this. This year, this summer, we did not have the same amount of rain that we had in the previous 3 summers. And now all of a sudden with Harvey, everything that we didn't get for an entire year, especially in Austin, it rapidly caught up, and in Houston tragically caught up. So there's been, in my estimation, especially during the Obama administration, there is a concerted effort to economically damage the state of Texas. The state of Texas, and I'm going to get back to Michael Snyder's post here in a second. The state of Texas is probably the largest threat to the United States if and when there is secession from the states, and we're getting really close to having a secessionary movement. We're watching and we're witnessing the breaking up of the United States in slow motion. It's like when you get into a car wreck, time slows down. Right before that moment of impact, everything just kind of becomes, a frame by frame Sam Peckinpah movie. Everything gets real slow. And we're watching this happen right now in real time. The state of Illinois just voted to become a sanctuary state. California's already done it. There are 3 other states that have voted to become sanctuary states. And you may say, well, that's fine. It's all well and good. These poor people need to have some place to go and to be protected from the evil overarching arm, the mechanical arm of the federal government, the Borg state that will reach in and snatch them and their children and snatch their children from these poor people who have no place to go, whose lives are a tragic theater of the common man, right? I mean, so this all kicks in with the mindset of people that are really wanting people, across the world, across the board, to have a better life. Like, I get it. I totally get it. It hits that heart. Oh, we have so much. We have to stand up for these people because, they're going to be abused and ramrodded and they're going to be manipulated and they're going to be tossed around and their lives will have no significance. You know what that really is, by the way? You know what that really is? That is a massive form of projection. That is a massive form of projection. Because what's happening is that people who have such strong convictions around this are internalizing the plight of a group or a particular set of people. And then they're projecting their own sense of vulnerability, frailty, and raging sense of injustice in their own life onto that group. And it is much easier for them to identify with that and see it as an outward cause of something that's much deeper inside themselves. That if you ask them to really look at and peel back the layers, most people would not be able to identify with that kind of projection. And I'm going to tell you right now, and this may kind of blow out some of the people that are listening here, because I like to play both sides, or I like to not play both sides, but I like to examine both sides, is that even on the conspiracy side, it is a function of the same kind of fear and a lack of control in one's life to be able to project that outwards. Now, that said, on the conspiracy or the alt news or the citizen journalism side of things, there's a function that is actually healthy and applicable, because what's happened? Our federal government, the mainstream media, the representation or representative government from our congressmen, senators, the judiciary branch, none of that is really working for us. So what do we have to do? We have to become our own watchdogs. We have to look at what's going on. We have to see where all these things are, manipulated to a large degree. So one of the things that we have to understand is that everything starts internally and we project it outwards. But in many of these cases, there can be a good reason why, or there can be a solid reason why this occurs, why it's taking place, because the four states, or the five estates, have completely and utterly sort of left us on the side of the road. And what we're also trying to do, especially astrologically with Saturn and Sagittarius, is get to the truth. And Saturn's moved forward now and will be out of Sagittarius in December. So we have a few months here to really, codify some things if we can. Because once Saturn gets into Capricorn, look out, boys and girls. The next phase of the Saturnine putsch, the overdrive, the Capricornian overdrive, the Baphomet overdrive will be on. So let's get back to what we're talking about here before I went off in that little rant about the states. And it's happening. It's happening. Texas is one of the states that is a major problem for the federal government and the New World Order. Number one, up until Harvey, Texas has the ability to basically be a sustainable nation unto itself. Fossil fuel, it's here in Texas. The ability to refine those fossil fuels, for the most part, they've been here, but there's all kinds of refineries in Houston which are being shut down now. We have huge amounts of cattle. The valley here in Texas is probably maybe not quite as large as the Central Valley in California, which is one of the largest food-growing regions in the world, but it's not that far behind. And then, of course, we have a population that is armed to the teeth and a mindset that is extremely independent. So if they're gonna flip the United States, into this model of the New World Order, which is really what they want to do, they have to destabilize Texas in whatever way, shape, or form they can. They have to weaken Texas, because a weakened Texas is actually a pretty powerful strategy in terms of being able to achieve the ends of what these people might actually have in mind. But also, if we're in a secession, and that's especially if we're in a secessionary era, and it really feels like we are. We just, like I said, we just had Illinois step away from basically declare themselves a sanctuary state in retaliation of the federal government. Okay, let me just go back to the article here. One meteorologist is saying that what we are witnessing is worse than the worst case scenario for Houston. And another stated that the storm could easily be one of the worst flooding disasters in U.S. history. It's really playing out that way. Really playing out that way. It would be difficult to overstate the devastation in the Houston area at this moment. Hurricane Harvey has ripped roofs off of homes, turned vehicles over, and snapped thousands of trees. Thousands have been rescued from their homes and vehicles, and it is being reported that so far 5 people have died. In fact, one woman's dead body was actually spotted floating down the street. How about that? I'd like to see that. As you have your 40-inch TV over your head when you're trying to get out, and all of a sudden you see a dead body floating down the street. According to the National Weather Service, over 24 inches of rain fell in Houston in just a 24-hour period. More rain continues to fall in southeast Texas, with meteorologists are running out of adjectives to describe the nightmare that is currently unfolding. It's catastrophic, unprecedented, epic, whatever adjective you want to use. Patrick Blood, a National Weather Service meteorologist, told the Chronicle, it's pretty horrible right now. The newspaper reported that the Weather Service and the people have died in Houston area in unconfirmed flood-related deaths. The latest forecasts are telling us that we could see a total of 40 to 50 inches of rain in southeast Texas by Thursday. 40 to 50 inches of rain. Wrap your head around that. 40 to 50 inches of rain. It will be the worst hurricane flood in the history of Texas and likely approaching the history of the United States. Now, one of the things that we haven't really talked about is, guess what? Remember I said that there is the window for the eclipse, which is roughly a week and a half to 2 weeks before the eclipse and a week and a half to 2 weeks after the eclipse. When did all this hit us? Well, it hit us on Saturday, which was the 26th. When did the eclipse hit us? On the 21st. That's 6 days after the eclipse. Harvey has taken place in the shadow of the eclipse. And I connect the dots here. Connect the dots. Everything that the eclipse illustrated as it cut across the center of the United States, literally splitting it in half, is an illustration, a metaphor, and an actual geophysical demarcation of what's happening in this country. Now, one could make a case that Harvey has the potential of pulling us all together. Now, you know what's interesting about Harvey now? We're not talking about Charlottesville that much anymore, are we? No, we're not. And then you have these guys, these clowns who are sitting on one knee at the start of NFL games, protesting change. Things have got to change. Things have got to change. What has to change? What has to change? When you get down into the whole question about change, and you eventually reach this level where what they do is they reveal what their model of change is. And the model of change, if you drill down deep enough, it starts with a list of demands. It starts with financial compensation, aka reparations. Then it goes deeper and deeper and deeper until finally you drill down to the core of what change is for some of these people, and that's give up your homes, give up your land, walk away from everything, and give it up. Give it up to other people. Give it up to some form of a newly federated, not even federated, but a newly formed government that will manage all the resources and redistribute it to everybody else. That is ultimately the level of change that when you really drill down, it's like, okay, what we really want is we want equality. We want a a band of equality for everybody. But the band, the equalization of that band of equality is never about rising up. It's never about, what we really want is we all want to rise up together. It's about tearing down suppressing the ability to rise up together so that everybody is kind of at this lower level flat line place of existence. That's what it's about, ultimately. And it's all ultimately about grabbing resources and theoretically redistributing them. And then it'll all be okay. Then we'll all be equal. Because whatever form of suffering people have, they will now be able to inflict it on others. So really, it's like, you want to, here we go. Equality equals suffering on one level. There it is. All right, let's get back to this. A year's worth of rain, this is from the same blog, a year's worth of rain may fall in the span of a few days near the Texas Gulf Coast, reported weather.com. A multi-day deluge of the Texas Gulf Coast with catastrophic and life-threatening flooding and destructive winds could leave areas uninhabitable for an extended period of time, the National Weather Service has warned. Are you picking this up? Uninhabitable for an extended period of time. This is the fourth largest city in the United States. Maybe the third. Which makes it probably one of the 15th largest cities in the world. And there are areas of Houston that will be uninhabitable for a long period of time. It appears to be inevitable that more people are going to die. Michael needs to prove his article. More going to die before this is all over. Authorities are trying to rescue as many people as they can, but there just aren't enough resources as the water continues to climb. Some people are actually climbing into their attics in a desperate attempt to save themselves. That's a very bad idea. Here's another quote. We are getting calls from people climbing into their attic. This is along I-45 between downtown and Clear Lake, Lindner said. This is along Berry Bayou, Beamer Ditch, Turkey Creek, portions of Clear Creek, Vince Bayou, Little Vince Bayou in Pasadena. He said pretty much the entire southeast side of Harris County has had 13 to 15 inches of rain in 3 hours. Lindner said that they're also seeing flooding along portions of Hunting Bayou, downtown along Buffalo Bayou, Brays Bayou, Keegan's Bayou. Notice the word Bayou keeps coming up. Chief Art Acevedo used to be the police chief of Austin. He got kicked out by the new mayor. Tweeted, have reports of people getting into attics to escape floodwater. Do not do so unless you have an axe or a means to break through your roof. This is already being called a once in 500-year flood. Experts are already telling us that the economic damage is going to be in the tens of billions of dollars. Not to mention the fact that Houston is one of the largest oil ports in the entire world. It is one of the major oil ports in the United States, if not the largest. And it's not just taking oil in from other parts of the world, but there's also refineries. Now, Beaumont, Texas, which lies to the east of Houston, is a major oil producing area. So is Lake Charles, and that's where the storm is headed next. If Harvey continues to do its damage, it could conceivably, I wouldn't say completely wipe out oil production and refinery in this country, but it would be a major blow. I'm going to throw a figure out there. I'd say about 25 to 30%, maybe 35%, and watch oil prices spike. I mean, they will go through the roof. If you are playing the gas commodities, oil commodities, if you're playing the futures game, you probably just made a shitload of money based on what's happened now. Think about that. So who will benefit ultimately from this besides the people that have played the futures market, who may or may not have had some foreknowledge of the event? I'm not going to go that far, but you could, theoretically wrap your head around it. Look here, I'm going to take a little side road for a moment. Back in the day, I used to work for a company that was a hedge fund. And I wasn't a part of the hedge fund. I was part of a company that they owned. So I got to know some of the hedge fund guys, and I got to know, or I started to familiarize myself with what hedge funds do. And let me give you an example of what a hedge fund does. They go out and they solicit clients. And they say, they solicit high money clients. Bernie Madoff ran a hedge fund. There are other hedge funds, obviously, and a lot of them, I think they should be completely dismantled and outlawed. That's my 2 cents. But let's say they have an exclusionary ceiling, and to get into that hedge fund, you've got to have no less than $1.5 million to buy into the hedge fund, which for some people, that's not a big spend, to be honest with you. So let's say you're the hedge fund. Let's make it an even $2 million to get in. You're the hedge fund, and you have kind of exclusive list or group of 200 people that have all invested $2 million. Now you've got $200 million to start off your hedge fund with and play with. And what do you think they do with this money? They use it to move and manipulate markets. I'll give you just a small example of the power of a hedge fund. So let's say the guys in the hedge fund decide that they want to play the orange futures, which means, or orange juice, or let's see, orange juice, because that's a commodity that's traded, is orange juice. So the price of orange juice over a 60-day period, you have to bet over a 60-day period if the price of orange juice will exceed a certain point, a spike point on this graph. You're betting, essentially. Let's say the price of orange juice for a gallon, I'm just throwing this out there, gallon of orange juice is $3.50 for a gallon of orange juice. The spike price by a certain point in time says it will exceed $3.50 by this time. And if it does, and you throw down, say, $1 million, well, you get your $1 million back and another $1 million. Basically, it's double or nothing, really. I mean, if it doesn't, you lose everything. If it does, you double up. Okay? You can go the other way too, and let's say there is a floor, and let's say orange juice will drop to, instead of $3.50 a gallon, it will drop to $3.40 a gallon. So that 10-cent range is kind of a big deal in these futures markets. So if it does drop, and you're betting that it does drop, it's the same thing. You can either bet high or you can either bet low. You can either bet the ceiling or you can bet the floor. So what a hedge fund will do is, let's say they want to do oranges or the orange juice. They'll go in and they will buy huge amounts of oranges in Florida. They'll buy them. They will buy them. So then guess what happens? They will take those oranges out of circulation for production. I don't know what they'll do with them, but they'll buy them and they'll take them out of circulation. And guess what happens? There's less oranges. Which means that in order for the manufacturers of orange juice, who normally have lots of oranges to make their orange juice from, have less oranges to make their orange juice from. So now they have to raise the price of their orange juice to cover the shortfall because it's a volume game. So it's really simple. If you're selling less orange juice, you have to raise the price. This is what hedge funds do. They are basically, for the most part, legalized economic gangs that influence markets due to the sheer volume of money that they have at their disposal. Now, just think about, let's say you're one of the 200 people that have invested $2 million, and you're getting anywhere between 20 to 25% interest on your original investment. Well, that's like, it's incredible. Even if you're getting 15%, it's incredible. But on the other side of this, if you're a really successful hedge fund, you have more money in your war chest. So your power grows and accrues. You basically become like an economic version of Harvey. So keeping that in mind, if the world is, in my estimation, this is what it's really kind of devolved into, a series of organized gangs, crime syndicates that are masquerading as governments and corporations, and for the most part, they're all in collusion with one another. And that's just the way it is. If you're Goldman Sachs, which is another version of a hedge fund, to be honest with you, if you're Goldman Sachs, extremely powerful, and your channels of power extend into other groups, other corporations, other organizations. How far does that extend? Does it extend into black science? Can Goldman Sachs and a hedge fund or a series of hedge funds be that deep and that entrenched and saying, throw this thing on, we're going to profit from this in so many ways you can't even begin to wrap your head around it. And so we have the weather modification turned on, flipped on. We know what they did with Katrina. They steered Katrina right into New Orleans, and I'm guaranteeing you that Harvey's been manipulated. It is a massive, massive weather manipulation. And there are people that make money off of it. I mean, look, let's go back to 9/11. There were people that made money off of shorting the stocks of American and United. They made money off of it. And they knew at that point in time that this event was going to take place. And they're like, okay, well, let's just throw that down. And it's never been followed up. Never been followed up on. Nobody's ever, ever, ever followed that trail. I mean, if they did, they certainly aren't telling anybody who actually profited off of shorting those stocks. It's the same thing with the futures markets and the commodities. I'm just giving you some other things to think about here. This is a big deal. Here we go. Listen to this. This is what Michael Snyder says. Earlier this month, I wrote about an unusual series of events that would happen over a 40-day period, starting with the recent solar eclipse. But of course, at the time, I couldn't account for additional unexpected events, such as Hurricane Harvey, and I find it very interesting this hurricane began forming just about the same time as the eclipse. Hello. They could have gotten people out of Houston. All right, let's go to another piece here, which is, I think, one of the more important. Here we go, see if I can find this. Remember, I'm doing a lot of this on the fly because I'm in a top secret location. Let's see what we have here. Let's see. Okay, I'm having a hard time finding this. Tomorrow, I'll tell you what, here's what we're going to do. This is really part one of this broadcast. Tomorrow, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the long-term effects here and the FEMAization of what's taking place in Houston. So the bottom line is, if you feel moved to do something in the wake, I mean, I could sit here and talk about this for the next 3 hours. But part of what this broadcast is supposed to do is synthesize ideas and information so you can get a really intense dose of it and then begin your own search, your own exploration, confirmation, whatever takes place. You may say, this guy is fucking nuts. It's just a hurricane. No, it's more than that. Trust me on this. So why don't we come back tomorrow and we'll go down the rabbit hole, Harvey, the invisible rabbit hole, again. And if you feel so inclined to donate, please, I'm going to utter something blasphemous. Do not donate to the Red Cross. It will steal your money. There are plenty of local charities. There are plenty of local groups in Houston, in the surrounding area. If you want to throw down $15, $20, $100, go find them. Don't be lazy and just text 90999 on your phone or whatever it is and have your phone clipped for $10. The Red Cross are a bunch of thieves. Sorry, that's a known fact. But feel free to help out whatever way you can. And if you do pray, and some of you people out there are, very powerful in terms of meditation and prayer and being able to activate it. This is full time now. We're on. We are on the clock. And it is going to be not just Harvey, but moving forward, we're going to have to really bind our spiritual forces together to get through this time and the deconstruction phase and living our lives, because we have to live our lives simultaneously. I mean, this is kind of the mind-blowing thing out of all of it. We have to live our lives simultaneously while we're also gathering our spiritual forces. And, there are parallel timelines. Things can go a number of different ways here. This is not set in history. It is not, we're not in John Teeterville yet, although we may hit it at some point. So use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible, and be in the world and not of it. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back 24 hours from now with more updates on Harvey and a deeper dive into the long-term ramifications. You've been listening to 15 Minutes of Flame.